Afternoon everybody. As you can see, for this one we've gone back to Meccano, and for this one we've gone back not very far, just to a few months ago, and one of the latest sets, the 25 model multi-model set, first introduced around about 4 or 5 months ago this year. The set's available for anywhere between around $34.99 and $35.99 from all the usual high street suppliers such as Smythes or Smiths, depending on how you want to pronounce it, their toy shop, Toys R Us and Argos. If you want more than one set, I suggest trying Smiths or Smythes. They seem to stock quite a few sets and quite a few of the same set. Argos tend to only stock one or two, and it's pot luck whether you get some of the sets in Toys R Us. Plus also, Toys R Us generally are the most expensive and probably the most difficult to find the sets in the store. Obviously the internet may be cheaper, but of course there's posts on top of that usually. So overall, or at least now the model's built, the model is a decent model, works quite well. It's quite traditional in one way. As you can see, there's quite a few gaps in the bodywork. For example, no lower doors really, no back to the cab, no real roof. This is sort of, and I don't know if they intended this, but this is sort of going back to the very early days, up till possibly around the first 10 years, or towards the end of the first 10 years of Meccano. So around 1910, 11, maybe a bit more after that. Then they started to suggest using cardboard to fill in gaps, and I've certainly found this on some of the models in the World War I project that I've been doing. A bit later on, I think it was mid to late 20s, they brought in flexible plates which were very similar to cardboard. They were like a fibre, but they lasted about one use. Then they had more like what we know of today, but with sharp edges, so that don't last that long either. And then they went to the rounded corner flexible metal plates, of course. But the last, from my purchases of sets, say new old stock sets, the multi-model stuff, they do seem to have gone away from the flexible plates, and I don't think that they are included at all in any of the multi-model sets now. Certainly the new sets, this 25 model, the 20 model and the 15 model sets, they don't include any flexible plates, which is a bit unfortunate really, but I suppose it is a bit traditional. I don't think it's meant to be that. Feature-wise, the model has an electric motor driven by, in this case, 2 AA batteries, or pencil batteries as us older folk know them as, thus giving 3 volts, and this drives via a drivetrain, which I'll show you later, a bit more close up, to give you a reduction gearing, and with the model being quite light, it does drive very well. Now, the standard Meccano motor is 3/6 volt, and in general you get either the 3 volt battery box or the 6 volt battery box, depending on the set. Now, I do have ideas to modify and add to this model in the near future, hence why I've bumped up this one up the video queue, if you like. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is to fit a 6 volt battery box if there's enough room here. I suppose it could be slung underneath really, but more on that later on. So the model has the, as I've said, the electric motor and the drivetrain to reduce the ratio, give it a better pull. There has been issues with the model, and I'll say now really, it is flawed as a model. The set is flawed as a model, or this specific set that I had was flawed as a model, and I know of a few other sets which we'll come on to when we get to each stage, if I can fathom my notes. They're quite extensive, and with my handwriting very hard to read. You've also got suspension, cab suspension really on this. It's a feature of this set. Most of the models do involve using these large shock absorbers, which is quite good and fun if they serve a purpose. Now, on the 4-wheel drive model, or off-road model, the main set model that you see on the box in the instruction book, and we'll go into the instruction book shortly, the suspension is more directly involved with the axles and the wheels. But on this one, it's on the cab, and as you can see, doesn't really do a lot. There is a reason for why it doesn't move that much, which we'll go on to later on. So feature wise, that's really it. So there ain't a lot of it. There's no steering, but it's not a bad looking model all round really. I know you're making stuff from what, you know, the sets, and in this case the set models, so they start with one model I suppose and then make models from those same parts. But one thing would have been great, some washers for lights. It would have 2 nuts and bolts, 2 washers to represent lights. It's like it's got no face, but it's a very light model. The zinc plating is poor on some of the zinc parts. It does run well. Of course, I can't really show you it running on the floor. In this place, it's too small. And it's carpet, which tends to naff up the performance anyway. So what I will do, I'll just lift the back end up and I'll let it go. There we are, going forward. And going backwards. And what I'll do, I'll just put it down so you can see. It'll probably take off or move the cover. You see, it's quite I can't pull it back without ruining the cover. So as you can see, it's a pretty decent model overall. Now it's finished. There were problems getting there, but it's not a bad little model. It has, well, I say little, not that little really. It has thrown up a few problems along the way, and if I can read my notes, we'll let you know about them as we go. So before we actually get on with the various notes I've made and the stages of the build, this is the front cover of the instruction manual, and indeed is more or less the same as the box illustration. There you can see the off-road vehicle, which is the main set model. The only trouble is it's not 4-wheel drive, so that put me off straight away. Being a Land Rover person, for my sins, I wasn't too keen on making it anyway because it's not a Land Rover. But that's just me. There are pointers to that with other videos on the channel, if you like. You'll only see Land Rover stuff in the form of the real off-road vehicles, I suppose. There are a few others sneaking here and there, but essentially. So I wasn't inspired, if you like, to make that one. If it was 4-wheel drive, yes, I probably would have done. But you can see from just this picture here, you can see that the suspension does work slightly anyway, pivots a little bit, and at the back as well. Not too bad at all, but not enough to inspire me. You'll see down here we've got some of the models that you can build in the set. As usual, you are shown instructions, and pretty decent instructions. That's one thing that has seemed to come on quite a bit. The instructions are split up into many sections with just a little bit to do on each stage, which makes it, for the most part, quite easy to follow. But because of the many sections to each model build, you would have a massive, really thick book, and this one's pretty thick as it is. I mean, there you are. You can see it's quite thick there. It's probably what, I don't know. No, it's a bit old and worn, I suppose. It's probably about 3 or 4 mil. In all, how many pages have we got? We've got 92 pages, including covers. So you don't get all the instructions for all the models. You have to go online for that, which has been a feature for some years now, probably about 5 years. And if I open the page, I'll show you the models. It's a bit awkward because I've folded it on the back of itself, but there you can see there's a lot of models there, and you get 7 models in the instruction book and a further 18 to download off the Meccano website. What I will say about the models, or some of the models, some of them do look very similar to older set models. There may have been slight tweaks. Obviously there's colour changes. The trike and there's a motorbike somewhere there do look similar to others. I haven't compared them directly with any of the ones that I've got in other instruction books, so I can't say they're exactly the same. This one here is looking rather good because it has got the shocks used, at least on the swing arm at the back of the motorbike. I ain't got a clue what that thing is, and I presume that that is some sort of tractor pull competition tractor. That is a bit of an issue that's been brought up occasionally, but to do with the instruction book really. Now regarding the instruction book, your first stage, as is always with the models containing motors, is to put the motor together. And you can see that there. I'll say put the motor together, you really just put the battery box together for future use. I generally don't put the batteries until I need it. And then you get on with the instructions, which is this is just at random. This is part of the instructions for the off-road vehicle, and as you can see there, just to the left, number 39, you can see it's quite clear, and there's very little to do to look, 37, there's just one bolt, one nut, two parts. Sometimes it's a bit more than that, of course, but it does mean that there's a lot of stages to each build, which, as I said before, would make the book quite thick. It's thick enough now. This is the end of the off-road vehicle, and we've got 50 stages. What you normally get is a picture at the end, as you can see there on the right, of the finished model, and if the model does anything, such as I don't know, say a crane, and it works, and say it lifts the hook up and down, it'll usually show an arrow saying that the hook moves up and down, or I don't know, perhaps the steering or the dumper part of the truck tips up. So it tells you what it can do. But I'm going to try and find there's one of a plane there. I can see what that does. I can see where it is. But there's some models. What's this one here? Yeah, here we are. This is probably the one one of them that I have most problem with. Now, here we have some sort of road vehicle. That's pretty easy to see. But what sort of road vehicle? It's a bit odd. What is it? And a little bit of print there saying XYZ car, whatever. It looks quite sci-fi, I suppose. But it'd be nice to have just a little title to each one, like they used to have, really. So the instruction book on the whole is pretty good. What I will say about it, and it's not happening now, you may be able to see there the sellotape on the end. I did this fairly early on to prevent it ripping, because the book is quite heavy, and a lot of the earlier sets, such as the 50 model Multimodels set for example, has got a properly bound instruction book, because there's quite a few pages in it, and it's quite weighty. This one hasn't, so when you're holding the pages open, the weight of the majority of the book pulls on the staples and tends to pull them out, so I put that on to prevent it happening in the first place, really. I've already mentioned the plating issues. Now we move on to the build. I apologise now if I get a bit confused and a bit disjointed. It's been 3 or 4 months since I scrawled my notes. I'm having to use the notes. I'm having to use more basic notes to make sure I don't go too off track, and I'm having to use the instruction book to remind me what's going on, what went on. So stage 4 involved putting some gears into the drive chain. At this point we've put the battery box together. Of course none of the chassis is there at all. We're just concerning that, and nearly all models that concern putting a motor in, and this was a tip that my dad gave me years ago. If you're going to build a model with a motor, whether it's clockwork, steam powered or electric, always build the model around the motor. It's far easier to do that, and indeed it is. Those of you who've seen my World War One project Type B London bus, or an appreciation of it, it's crying out for a nice clockwork motor, and I've had a bit of a look at it, and it's not going to be that easy because I'm working backwards, if you like. So all the instructions that I've built of late with models that contain a motor, they all start with the motor. Battery box first, and then you start bolting bits onto the motor. This usually forms, as in this case, a couple of brackets. Could be formed by strips, or in this case, trunnions. The problem with this was the trunnions weren't formed correctly, so they weren't formed to the correct 90 degrees there, and thus were splayed out too far. It wasn't a great deal, but it meant that there was far too much play in this part of the drive chain with this axle. So I took them off and bent them to the correct shape. Didn't take a lot, don't need any tools really. So that was the first issue with the gears. Whilst I'm at it, I'll just show you operating from underneath. It does work quite well, even though there's plastic gears. There is some bits of moulding left on the gears themselves, but not anywhere near the teeth. It's hard to see. There's a bit of moulding on that pinion there, on the side of the pinion, extra moulding. But the gears themselves are pretty good, and I'll lubricate them with furniture polish, especially after blister with the dust. By the way, that's one of the videos where you can see it operating at the blister Telford and Ironbridge Meccano Society meeting or show back in August. If you look at that one, the Tim's, I think it's labelled as, it's either Tim's or Telford and Ironbridge Meccano Society, Blister 2014. You can see this running along with the Land Rover 101. Of course, when you're building these models, whether they're your own creations out of your brain box or set models, you realise that when you was a kid, your hands weren't long enough, but they could get into all nooks and crannies. When you're older, your hands are longer enough, but you've got two fat fingers to get anywhere. So, as you go, you learn different ways how to put things together, and you pick up a bit of tips that may or may not work for you. This is one that should work for everybody. When you are fitting the small rubber grommets, that's these here, so almost clear, opaque if you like, grommets, you can push them on fine, but they tend to go on a little bit unevenly, a bit squirrely. So what I use, it would perhaps not use this in this case because it's quite a little bit further in the wheel and you can't get at it. But I'll use this here as an example here on this rail here. There's one there, and to get a nice even pull on it or push on it, use the box spanner end of the spanner that you get with the newer sets and push on it evenly like that. If it goes out of shape or doesn't go on evenly, just push it on it, and it gives you a little bit better push. Nice and easy to do that way. So now we get to stage 5, and no need to worry, I do try and keep them short, they don't always end up that way. We're not going to go through every single stage. Most of my notes are just timing information, how long it took me to do a certain stage, for example. But now, say stage 5, and this is the major problem, if you like, the main problem of the set. And it was, well, it made me sweat, I must admit, and dare I say it, I did give up in the end and resorted to a hammer. From that point of view, the set's flawed because you can't make the set, at least the one from this box, and one or two I've heard of other sets of the same 25 model set. You can't make the set very easily with the tools provided in the set, i.e. the Allen key and the spanner. However, before we get too far down that road, as you can see, this is the end of the rear axle, and as you can see, the axle is only just long enough. Now, we don't really want to see loads of axles sticking out the side. I'm looking at my model here, and the to get it to be that flush, if you like, the strip, one of the strips is slightly bent in to allow the axle to accommodate everything on the axle, the wheels, the spacers, the gears, etc. Of course the grommets as well. However, we don't really need the grommets on this, but I'll tell you about that in a second. The problem with it is the axle's too short. Now, the axle in the parts list at the stage for this listed the 130mm axle. The diagram that you measure, which is included at every stage now where there's something to measure like a bolt or an axle, which saves you turning back to the front or the back of the book every time, that was 130mm as well. The length of the axle is actually 126mm, and there you have your problem. It's only a few millimetres, but it's enough. But the real issue is the diameter of the axles. They're oversized. Now, I've been told that this is due to the way they've been cut, that spreads out the ends of the axles, which made fitting wheels very, very difficult. The amount of force needed without something like a hammer is, to be honest, dangerous. If you slip, the axle could go into your hand, or it will bruise anyway. I don't want to frighten anybody with that, but if you do have trouble getting the axle on and you're going to continue with the model, use a hammer. It's only a light tap needed, just be careful when you do so. Now, I've heard that it's only the ends of the axles, but in this case I had the same issue all the way down the axles, because obviously I had to fit some gears onto some of the axles, and I had this problem all the way along the axles, not just at the ends. That said, it does mean that everything is very secure on the axle. You could throw away these grommets, really. It's that tight. So just be careful and use a hammer to gently tap the axle or the parts into place. So I've mentioned the moulding. Some of the mouldings you will find a little bit of excess moulding. There was a problem at this stage 5, the 57 tooth gear, which is that one there, you can see there, wasn't shown on the parts list. So you get to the stage and you look down the parts list, see what you want to get. This is the way I do it, and then you get your parts out the box. You say, right, I need 4 bolts, 4 nuts, whatever. The actual gear wasn't listed, but it is shown in the diagram. So that's a case of a bit of an head scratcher, but it's there for you to see, really. Stage 6, nothing much really, but from a quality control point of view, one of the narrow strips was bent. Not that bent that you couldn't do anything with it, but it was bent. A plus point. Now, I've probably mentioned this before, but if I haven't I will now. When you open a box these days, it looks a bit underwhelming, to be honest. You've got a box which, with some boxes, look quite empty, with several plastic bags in it. And I know that other construction set manufacturers do exactly the same, and I know it's cheap. But there are a couple of problems with it. One, it looks pretty poor. 2, once you open the bags, the boxes are quite poor at keeping the contents inside, and you can lose bits. But the main thing that I detest about it, up until this set, was the plastic bags are too good. I know that sounds bad. You try and open them without a sharp implement, you know. I end up using a spanner or an Allen key to rip a hole in the bags. I cannot open them. Whereas this set was just right. The bags were easy to open, yet secure enough to keep the parts in place. So folks, we scoot ahead to stage 12, and probably the most annoying cock-up with the, put it bluntly, with the diagrams for this model. This bent or formed braced girder is shown in the instruction to fit on top of this 5.5-inch strip. The trouble is that bolt head's in the way and that bolt head's in the way, so how do you do it? There's no spacers, so a quick look once I sorted it. If I look at the next stage, stage 13, it shows you how it fits, and at stage 14 it will show you the finished position of both of these, which is alongside these strips, not on top. I'll show you this on the diagram. It's quite awkward to do it on the model, and it's awkward to do it with this as well, but stage 14 this is. As you can see, we've got a narrow strip here, and it's supposed to fit across here, and indeed it does. But the lines of the build are pretty poor in the fact that they go in front of these strips and through these two holes here. But awkward to show you. I should get a strip as my pointer really. But so they go through the two holes here, which is correct. They go in front of these strips, the lines, and then through these holes here, and then through the holes there. That's correct. But it seems to show that that fixes there. That's incorrect. It's just a case of the way the lines have been printed. These lines should have gone behind these strips, so you couldn't see them, then to there, to show that they connect up to the holes here. So this strip goes across here. It's pretty self-explanatory when you look at the next stage, and as you can see, stage 15, you can see the strip in place there. The battery box is supposed to fit across the chassis there, but can't for several reasons. One is you're only given standard length bolts to do so, which screw from underneath. Because you've got the bolt heads here, that means the battery box can't fit flush, therefore the bolts aren't long enough. So in an attempt to rectify the situation in hope, I got two 12mm bolts from the set, hoping that they wouldn't be needed in a later stage of the build, and I used some spacers. I can't remember now, the spacers probably were spare, but anyway the bolts were used later on, so I had to remove the bolts, and in the end I put the battery box to where you can see it now inside the cab. For ease of operation I fitted the battery box with the switch to the rear so you can get at it, but the trouble is, to change the batteries you've got to unscrew the battery box from the chassis, and in this case it's just one bolt underneath, so it's not too bad, it just fits there. That was so annoying, and I thought, what the bleep, you know, and it does make you scratch your head. You think, why? You're trying to make it popular again, and I know these are sets from the previous owners really, but you're trying to make it popular again, and it's these sort of things with kids of today. If it's hard, they ain't going to want to know. It's modern life to have stuff. I want it now and I don't want to wait for it, and any problems like that would make your head scratch. First of all because you think, why? And in the kid's point of view, oh, I ain't bothered, shoved in the cupboard, I ain't going to buy another set, I don't like it. So things like that have got to be stamped out really. At the end of it I think it looks neater where it is. Incidentally, the bolts that I borrowed from the set to try and sort the battery box issues were actually the ones used up here to secure these later on. So I suppose what you could have done is not put these on, but there we are. Right, it did occur to me whilst I was building this model, not long after this stage, perhaps it would be more relevant and perhaps more exciting to the younger folk building the models if this model was actually more like a racing lorry, which is, I think, reasonably popular these days. Certainly has changed a bit from its early days. I don't know much about it at all, apart from a few of the drivers who used to be motorbike riders. But it wouldn't have taken a lot to do it that way, but granted I see an issue where you'd have to have different tyres in the set, costs more. the chunky tyres probably may suit some of the other models more. If you go on the motorbikes, I don't think they do really. But anyway, my first thought would be to fit the smoother tyres, more like racing slicks if you like, such as on this 7 multi-model set forklift. Once you have bought several sets, you'll have more wheels and tyres than you know what to do with anyway. So what they could have done perhaps is fitted those and dropped the, you want to make it look a little bit more realistic, drop the axles in this case up one hole, thus lowering it, getting it lower to the ground, making it a little bit more, I don't know, perhaps exciting because it's a racing vehicle. I suppose stickers with numbers, perhaps. Okay, that's more cost. It's just a thought that crossed my mind that might be more interesting, perhaps more exciting to a younger builder. So folks, we move on a bit in the build and we get to the cab, and what I did find was it's probably not really a quality control issue, more of a packing issue, and that is, I forget which one, so it's not that bad, but one of these flange plates and the centre flange plate had some paint missing. I don't think you can see it in the shot, and I can't remember exactly where it was myself. Certainly if there is an issue like that, I do try to hide it for aesthetic reasons by building it. So for example, if the scratch is in a corner of, say, this plate, I'll put that plate on to cover it up. That's not to hide the issue, just to make it more aesthetically pleasing. It wasn't a lot, as I say, I can't remember where it was, but that's probably more down to the fact that there's a lot of metal parts in the same bag. Right, we're leaping along now folks, we're up to stage 32 and fitting these bolts through these angle brackets and these odd plates. If anybody knows what they're called, let me know. As you can see, that doesn't allow any clearance there at the edge of this plate for the bolt, which means that the bolt is slightly at an angle. Now, the slots are used in the obtuse brackets at the back of here at full stretch, but there's still not enough leeway to clear this plate. This throws the bolt slightly out of alignment, slightly on a slope, which as I'm looking at it from the front here, which of course means there's slight alignment issues in the cab, both sides. As you've seen already, those issues aren't that bad, and it can, or it will rather, once it's put together, it'll look fine. So folks, you're probably by now glad to know we're nearing the end. Stage 49 was to fit the shock absorbers between the chassis and the cab, and there you can see them there. Now, that is not as they were shown to be fitted. Originally, in the instructions, the top mount for the shock absorber is this hole here. Now, unfortunately, that meant, although it did work quite well up and down, it meant that the cab was tilting very far forward at a terrible angle really. In reality, I suppose there'd be weight in the cab and it would compress the springs a little bit, thus making them level, but there's no weight in it. And I thought it was almost getting to the point where I thought this is getting a bit much, because there may not be major flaws, but when you add them all together, and I'm thinking that there's no way a young builder would have continued, I don't think, which is a shame because the end result is pretty good. So hopefully those of you who do see these sets, do buy them and do want to build this model and do have issues, hopefully this video will help you, which is what it's all about really. So what I did, I moved the shock top mount to the centre, but it wasn't a perfect solution, although it's the best one I think you can do with the set. The reason being, the distance required is a little bit, just a shade more on the angle of the centre hole. It needs to be slightly further away. Thus, I don't know whether you can see. You can probably see it's a slight pulling down of these brackets here. Only slight, both of those, but it's the better option. And because the shock absorbers are a lot more off the vertical, not that they were vertical, but there's a lot less movement really, or natural movement. Obviously it can come right down, but I'm really pushing some weight on that for that to happen. So that was a bit of a disappointment, and of course it was at this point that I spotted the fact that the bottom mount rod gets in the way, or the bottom of the shocks gets in the way of the battery box, as I mentioned before. So there we are, folks. That's it. I think that's all the problems and issues that I had with it. It feels like it's been a long one, and I apologise if it's that. I know it's a bit much sometimes, but bear with me on it. We'll tweak the videos as we go. We'll hopefully improve. But the model itself is a nice model once it's finished. Build time, because of all the little head scratching moments. Hey, what we got? We got the axle issues really, mounting the battery box, the shocks, and the cab issues, and I suppose these bolt issues and clearance with these plates. They look more like a wing really, I suppose, those things. But anyway, with all that thrown in, and of course including scrolling down my notes as I go, because I only really stop the clock when I'm not doing anything at all with it. You know, if the phone rings, then I'll stop the clock. But if I've just got to make a little note, I don't stop the clock. So you can knock some off of that, but it's still a long build. 5 hours 56 minutes, so 6 hours really, and to be honest it should have been 3. From all the models I've made, the average I would say is about 2 hours. That's from simple models to, or smaller models, to the bigger models, and in that I include things like these because they are a bit bigger. The model itself is pretty good. It's a pleasing model to me anyway, apart from all the faults in the build. It's more to do with the build issues than the model issues. Of course the end result I suppose is pretty much the same, but you will see that the model is quite flexible. I mean, you have to push on it, but it's not as solid as it might be. Now you've got no angled girders in this set, so I have got a couple more sets. The idea is to first of all beef up the chassis so it doesn't flex as much. To that end, I'm going to fit more 5.5 inch strips vertically down this side, held on with angle brackets. I may have to extend those at this end with 5L strips. I need to beef up this end here, put on the 5th wheel to connect a trailer, and although it's going to take quite a few sets, I think, if I go down buying the set routes, I'm going to make a trailer, low loader trailer, to carry a Mammoth traction engine. It is housed with the removable wheels at the rear, so the traction engine can sort of just roll on, roll off. Maybe a little winch, which I can't remember whether you get the string in this set, but certainly there are string in other sets, which is a bonus. So once you've got a few sets, some of the older sets, you put your parts together for those younger builders, put your parts together and add them to. They're all compatible, although the colours might be a bit odd, and hopefully change to a 6-volt battery box. The traction engines weigh about 1.5 kilogram roughly. So whether it's got enough power or not to do that with even with 6-volt, I don't know. But it's an interesting way of taking the model forward. And that's the reason why I've done the video now, so I can get on with that. So I hope you enjoyed that, folks. I hope it didn't put you off too much. The end result is pretty good. It's just a shame that more care wasn't taken over or some of the stages in the instructions. Overall, a decent set. Of course, the benefit is you can reuse it again, of course, and again, and again, and again, and again. Something's got to be done about the axles. That's probably the most difficult thing, because there ain't really much way around it apart from using a hammer. I'm not saying that every single set is like that. I know of one more, possibly, and two more have been reported to be like this. But that's it. So hopefully that is it. Who knows? So bye for now.